tax season. I know we're already going, but gotta go back. Okay. I got a little bit ahead of myself today. Welcome to today's Tax Talk. I'm your attorney, or your host. I'm attorney Stephen Leahy. Today is Monday, January 24th, the year of our Lord 2022. It's a big day for the tax professionals like myself. The tax season opens today. The IRS is going to start accepting tax returns. That's what we're going to talk about today. Won't you join us? Pretty easy to pick that subject today on the 24th of January that the IRS is coming out, opening up, let you start filing your tax returns. Remember last week I was talking about the free tax preparation software you can get from the IRS if you make less than $73,000. They've made it available. Go to T3 Free File. Actually, it's tinyurl.com/T3 Free File. tinyurl.com/T3 Free File. And you can get a list of companies that will allow you to use their software for free in coordination with the IRS. I don't know, the IRS is really starting to encourage people to file. I don't know. I guess it's the electronic. We talk a lot about this on the electronic. So let's go right to the stories and find out what the IRS says about all this, or what some of the news views say about this. I'm trying to see which story I want to start with. There's a couple stories. Let's do this one. IRS tax filing season begins on Monday. That's today. Monday, January 24th. So IRS, I should put my glasses on. IRS to require, then we talked about the facial recognition. We did that last week. So the tax filing season begins on Monday, and officials expect the process to be more challenging for the beleaguered Internal Revenue Service. The understaffed IRS will begin accepting individual returns for 2021, even though they are still processing a backlog of returns from the previous year. A huge number. We're going to talk about that. There's another story in here about that. The IRS commissioner said his teams have worked nonstop for months preparing for this tax season. But like most other parts of society, the COVID-19 pandemic has created obstacles that have hindered the workforce. Well, how could they have been working on this new tax season for months when they've been working on old tax stuff for years? I don't know. They can't do everything. According to the report by Fox Business, more than 20% of IRS customer service workforce has been unable to work for pandemic-related health reasons over the last 2 years, and the agency has 20,000 fewer staff than it did in 2010. I've pointed this out before, and I'm going to point it out again, that it's not really a fair comparison. And in a fair comparison, we look at how many returns were processed, and now there's more, and we should have person per person. The answer is no, you shouldn't. In 2010, there was a lot less electronic filing. They needed a lot more. It was a lot more labor intensive than it is now. And that's one reason why the IRS is behind. One of the reasons why the IRS is behind is because of the changes because of COVID, the child tax credit, and all of these unemployment, the changes to the unemployment. When they changed it in midstream, said that they weren't going to be taxable, and that gave the IRS a lot of they had to go back and redo a lot of things, and it makes them have a paper return, so they can't do it. They couldn't process it electronically. They had to go back and do it physically. We talked in the last couple of months about these error letters, and a lot of taxpayers are getting error letters, and because of some of the changes, the child tax credits and other credits that that taxpayers made errors on because this is new and they didn't know. And so the IRS had to go back and change a lot of those or review a lot of them where typically these are done electronically and they don't have to look at them. And so that's one reason why they're so far behind. Again, because they don't have the labor force, because generally they don't need the labor force they used to need. Just as an aside, because they keep throwing that. I think it's a canard, and they keep throwing it in there like this is the reason, and it explains everything. And I don't think it does. In many areas, we are unable to deliver the amount of. Now, this is the commissioner of the IRS. Okay, so this is not just some guy. In many areas, we are unable to deliver the amount of service and enforcement that our taxpayer and tax system deserves and needs. This is frustrating for taxpayers, for the IRS employees, and for me. But of course, to him, the answer is more money. And of course, he's always yelling about more money. They always want more money. I think they could do other things besides just, again, remember now, the budget, $14 billion a year. Though the pandemic continues to create challenges, the commissioner said that there are important steps taxpayers can take to help ensure that their tax return and refund don't face processing delays. Filing electronically with direct deposit and avoiding the paper tax return is more important than ever this year, as I just explained to you. And we urge extra attention to those who received an economic impact payment or an advanced child tax credit last year for the reasons I just explained to you, because that's where there's a lot of errors, and that's what creates a backlog at the IRS. People should make sure they report the correct amount on their tax return to avoid delays. Again, exactly what I was saying. When you make an error, they have to go back and review it. When they start reviewing it, it's going to go in the pile and it's going to get backed up. They're still looking at last year's returns that had these problems. So they'll never get to this year's returns. They won't get to those for some time. And so if you make an error, you're not going to get your refund very timely. That's just the way it is. The Treasury Department also urges taxpayers to file their returns as soon as possible, saying that previous returns are not needed in order to submit 2021 returns. That's true. I got a lot of my clients, sometimes they fall 2, 3, 4 more years behind because they believe they have to do the first return before they get to the next return. Now, sometimes if I have a lot of depreciation and things, that might be true to get an accurate tax return, but sometimes it's just better to file the return. This year's deadline for filing taxes will be April 18th, and we talked about that. Why that is, why it's April 18th and not April 15th as it usually is, because of Emancipation Day, which falls on the 16th, which is a Saturday, and so that means that April 15th the IRS is closed because they're in D.C. and the IRS will be closed. So the next date, work date, would be Monday, April 18th. Rather than the usual April 15th, but extensions can be requested online by filling out Form 4868. Remember, if you ask for a refund, got to pay your taxes by April 15th. Still, yes, when you ask for a refund, doesn't mean you get more time, an extension, doesn't mean you get more time to pay them. They want to get paid April 18th, By pushing back the filing date, you can also avoid a failure to file penalty, which is an extra 5% per month on the unpaid amount. That can add up to 25% of the tax due. And that's no fooling. This is what, when people are behind in their taxes, this really what gets them is the penalties and the interest. If the extension is granted, now extensions are routine. They will be granted. You have until October 15th before the penalty starts accruing, though experts caution that filing an extension does not mean you can delay paying Uncle Sam the taxes that are owed, as I just explained to you. So that's an important that's an important distinction. And again, never forget that. And a lot of times people will tell you, well, my accountant told me that I should just ask for an extension. But oftentimes the accountant wants you to get an extension because they're very busy around April 18th, and so they want to push your filing into October, so they can work on it over the summer when there's not as much work to be done. But oftentimes they fail to tell people that there's a penalty for not paying the tax man on time. And so a lot of times people don't even realize it. They just say, how much do I owe? And they get told and they pay it. But again, there is a penalty if you don't pay on time. There's two penalties: failure to file and failure to pay. Both penalties. And you can avoid one by asking for the extension. But you cannot avoid the failure to pay by asking for an extension. Just something you should know. The next area we're going to talk about. The IRS faces backlogs from last year, as new tax filing season begins. Okay. This Monday marks the beginning of tax filing season, when the IRS will begin accepting 2021 income tax returns from individuals and businesses. Most people have until April 18th to submit them this year. As it starts, now remember, the businesses are due in March 15th. I didn't look at the calendar to see if there's an extension for March 5th, but there isn't an Emancipation Day, so I'd assume that March 15th is the date. As it starts to accept this year's returns, the IRS is still working through millions filed last year, and that's just one of the problems. The service is in the roughest shape it's been in 50 years. Who serves as the IRS commissioner with George Bush? He says the agency is understaffed, has more work than it can handle, and is underfunded. They always say that. Again, now it might be underfunded because of the extra work that all of these changes from COVID has placed on the IRS. They just, so they need to fund it. But they do fund extra. So their regular budget is supplemented by additional monies from Congress that they're anticipating these additional costs. The result, he says, is the IRS has huge backlogs right now that are unprocessed returns for prior years, refund requests, and a lot of correspondence that hasn't even been opened. And it's very tough to get through on the phone. So that's a bad cocktail. Again, the reason why is that they're because of all of these mistakes and errors, and they have to process them by hand. The IRS has its own internal watchdog, the National Taxpayer Advocate, and her annual report. And we reviewed some of her report. We're going to do that again in the next couple of days. We'll review some more of her report. The Taxpayer Advocate. Remember, she said crisis. She called it a crisis. 35 million returns that required manual processing. Taxpayers who called the IRS for guidance had only 1 in 9 chance of getting their calls answered. Among the lucky 1 in 9 callers who was able to reach the customer service representative. The IRS reported that hold times averaged 23 minutes, according to the report, while also noting that practitioners and taxpayers have reported that hold times were often much longer. They're much longer than that. She told NPR that taxpayers are annoyed. It has been a very painful period of time, very frustrating, very hard for the taxpayers. They can't get through to the IRS through phones. Their paper correspondence have been piling up, so it's very difficult for them to figure out. Let's see if they push us to irs.gov. The IRS computers are the oldest major tech systems in the federal government. Collins says the IRS budget has declined by about 20% in the last 10 years, while the number of tax returns filed has gone up 13%. The agency's computers are the oldest major tech systems in the federal government. That's because they're unique, and so we've spent billions of dollars building them. So it's not that so being old is not always a bad thing here, because they spent a lot of money on a unique system. And so they still rely on that system. That's why they say, well, see, more returns, budget went down. Most of the money that the IRS spent was for labor, and that labor costs have drastically decreased over the years, except for last year, again, because of the number of paper returns that they're not really prepared for anymore. That is by far the more just processing returns. It's also having to make sure that those refunds and those amounts go to the right bank accounts, and the people are properly filing their returns so that they can access the benefits in what is a time of economic emergency. And while Congress did provide extra money for the IRS to process those payments, as I mentioned, one-off extra funding amounts aren't nearly enough to cover the longstanding funding issues that the IRS has and to deal with the personnel loss that they have accumulated over the past 10 years. They just keep going on with that story. The White House agrees. On Friday, Press Secretary called on the lawmakers to boost funding for the service. The Biden administration's Build Back Better Act would provide additional funding of $80 billion for the agency over 10 years. That's, again, almost doubling the number, the amount of money to the IRS, and more than doubling the number of IRS workers. But that package's future is in doubt, and lawmakers have yet to agree to funding bill for the agency for the current fiscal year. He suggests that IRS workers should go back to the office. Don't say it isn't so. He's now the vice chairman of the tax consulting firm. Supports more funding for the IRS, but says that long-term issue. In the meantime, one thing the agency should do now, he says, is call IRS employees who have been working from home because of COVID back to the office. They should all hands to the pump at this time, he said. They need to get everybody back to the office as soon as possible, so you just have more bodies working on these issues. Well, that makes sense. I guess I'll finish it because it's... Collins' report offers suggestions to address taxpayer problems, including adding a customer callback feature so taxpayers don't have to wait on hold and creating a filing season dashboard on irs.gov. There it is. They're pushing irs.gov. Remember now, I talked about this last week. Now they're going to ask you for biometric information. I know in Illinois there's rules against giving biometric information. I think the federal government avoids the Illinois law, but we're looking into that to see how that's going to apply because the Illinois law forbids using biometric without your permission. I guess they could say that they're going to make you give them permission. I'm not going to go there. So how should taxpayers deal with such a beleaguered agency? The IRS says make sure that all your documents are together when you start out working on your return and file electronically. There's also help. Taxpayers that earn less than $58,000 a year can get free help with the volunteer income tax assistance. That program, along with another called Tax Counseling for the Elderly, offers assistance from IRS certified volunteers. That other system that I told you, the taxpayer, tinyurl.gov slash T3, today's tax talk, free file. That's for people who make less than $78,000 a year. But it's not, there's no individual there that's telling you how to do it. It's just software that you can use for free to complete your tax return. And oftentimes it will not include state tax returns. So there might be a fee for that. So anyway, that's what's out there. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time. Remember that this is, I'm going to ask you to like and share. It's important that we get this information out to those who need it. I always tell you that I think the taxes are the center, the core of news. And that's where you find that right here today, here on today's Tax Talk. So help us get the word out. We appreciate it. And also remember, if you're fighting the IRS and you wonder where to start, you start with deal with your IRS problem today. Go to freeirsbook.com and get a copy of the book. freeirsbook.com. freeirsbook.com. Okay, thanks so much for joining us here today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Now, tomorrow is Crypto Tuesday, so lots going on in crypto world, so that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.